July 1776. Church bells ring across 13 colonies as crowds gather to hear a new document read aloud in town squares. It is a moment of pure civilian celebration, marking the birth of a new nation. This document is the Declaration of Independence. Its opening text lays out a radical claim. These 13 colonies are completely free. At the bottom, the signatures stand as physical proof of treason, providing the evidence King George III needed to justify a total war. Rhetoric and ideals are inspiring on paper, but a document cannot deflect a bayonet or hold a defensive line on a battlefield. Across the Atlantic, King George III read these words not as a political debate, but as an open state of rebellion. He immediately terminated all negotiations. The British government began assembling a massive military expedition to cross the ocean and crush the Americans by force. Declaring independence required courage and a pen. Surviving the catastrophic imperial retaliation that followed would require something entirely different. Within weeks, Britain mobilized one of the largest military forces ever sent across the Atlantic Ocean. This chart compares British economic wealth and naval fleet size in 1776 against the global average. The Crown possessed the world's richest economy and an undisputed naval supremacy that effectively controlled the oceans. The soldiers boarding these ships carried years of deep combat experience, fighting with intense discipline, striking uniformity, and standard-issue weaponry. British commanders sailed west with absolute confidence. They expected this overwhelming show of force to break the colonial resolve immediately. The American colonies had summoned a military threat of apocalyptic proportions. It was a machine that could not be reasoned with. It simply had to be survived. Waiting for that machine was the Continental Army, a fragile, starving, and largely untrained militia force carrying mismatched hunting rifles. A quiet logistical crisis threatened to end the war before the British could. Most enlistment contracts were set to expire within months, meaning the entire army could dissolve into the winter without firing a single shot. The burden of holding this force together fell to General George Washington. He recognized early on that he could not act as a glorious conqueror. His only option was to operate as a desperate survivalist. This diagram maps the standard approach to European warfare against Washington's new reality. While traditional armies clashed to conquer fixed map points, Washington lacked the resources to hold territory. His strategy relied on keeping his central army mass constantly moving away from destruction. His core philosophy was brutal but clear. If the army survives, the revolution continues. If the army is destroyed, the United States ceases to exist as a political entity. Winning was no longer about defeating the British Army in open combat. It meant simply outlasting their attempts to annihilate his men. In the summer of 1776, the clock ran out. An unstoppable armada of massive wooden ships sailed into New York Harbor. American observers on the shore watched in shock as tens of thousands of enemy troops and heavy cannons disembarked along the coastline. The target was obvious. Whoever controlled the deep-water ports of New York City controlled access to the American colonies. Washington responded out of desperation. He moved this outmatched army into defensive positions across Brooklyn and Manhattan to face the invasion head-on. The geography of New York created a precarious trap. Washington was attempting to defend a series of islands against an enemy who possessed the most powerful navy in the world. By trying to hold the city, Washington had inadvertently walked his fragile, untrained army directly into an inescapable, mathematically impossible trap. A horrific realization washed over the Continental Army. They were completely cornered and hopelessly outmatched. British commanders surveyed the field with supreme confidence. To them, the rebellion was in its final days. Victory was assured. This tactical map of New York illustrates the physical mechanics of the trap. British naval and land forces were closing in from all sides, completely severing all American escape routes to deliver one decisive blow. The ultimate burden rested entirely on Washington. He had to make a single, nearly impossible decision to somehow extract his trapped men. The conflict devolved into a state of visceral terror. Independence now depended on the ability to survive a muddy trench and escape an incoming bayonet. The signing of the Declaration had established a nation on paper, but its actual survival would be decided by the men bleeding in the mud of the summer of 1776.